A girl is all giggles and glamour and grace, with a gay, gentle smile and a glow on her face. A girl treasures ribbons and ruffly things, rag dolls and rainbows and roses and rings. A girl will like lockets and little white gloves, but lipstick and lace will be things that she loves.
Little boys are made for dads to buy a football for puppy dogs to follow home, for mothers to adore. They're made to play with hammers and with drums and model planes, to climb around in trees and walk through puddles when it rains.
These newborn infants are unique individuals. Will our society give them the freedom to grow into all sorts of people? Will the fact that they are a boy or a girl affect their opportunities in life, or what kind of people they become? Dr. Geraldine McDonald of the New Zealand Council of Educational Research believes that we do place limits on the growth of boys and girls from the very beginning.
The most important thing about a new baby is what sex is it? And once parents know what the sex of the child is, they begin to treat it in a way that in accordance with the sex. Now this means, of course, that girls are brought up in one way and boys are brought up in another way.
From immediately after birth, children are treated differently according to sex. Parents are constantly reminded of what society expects of boys and girls. Greeting cards emphasize stereotypes, gifts of pink things for girls and blue things for boys. Comments on the beauty and grace of girl babies or the physical strength of boy babies.
The stereotype sex role is a set of behaviours that we think people should conform to. We think that boys should act in a certain way and that girls should act in a certain way, and if they don't behave in that way, then they're not behaving appropriately. Female, of course, has got to be non-aggressive. She has to be caring and nurturing. It'd be a good idea if she falls over and hurts herself, but she has a little cry. She should help her mother, and so on. Oh, well, he doesn't have to do those things. He should be strong and manly and keep his emotions in check, brave and aggressive and adventurous, and most important of all, he should be a leader. The girl should probably be a follower, because roles are complementary, and if you're going to have leaders, then you've got to have followers.
Many sociologists, psychologists, teachers and parents have come to realize that setting down one set of behaviors as appropriate for one sex and a different set for another sex is unnecessarily restrictive. Children have much more chance of fully developing their potential as human beings if they're able to develop all sorts of characteristics, regardless of sex. There is evidence that men and women who are not restricted by sex role stereotypes are better adjusted socially and psychologically and achieve a higher level of education. Today's young people are moving into a world where roles are increasingly being shared. How well are we preparing them for these new, more flexible roles? We start to channel human behavior according to sex immediately after birth.
Considerable child development research shows that parents act differently towards boy and girl babies. Boys are rocked and handled more than girls and generally receive a higher level of stimulation and learning opportunities. Girls tend to be smiled at, talked to, and looked at more than boys. Although some have argued that the different treatment occurs because the babies are different to start with, it is doubtful whether this is an adequate explanation. One study by Hannah Frisch was designed to see whether adults treat a baby differently depending on whether they think it is a boy or a girl. The University of Otago Department of Education, we set up a replication of this study to illustrate it. 14-month-old babies were brought into the university playroom where they could be observed through a one-way mirror. Their mothers stayed in the room in the background. A variety of toys were made available in the room, such as trucks, blocks, dolls, puppets, a fireman's hat. 24 adults and babies took part in the original study. Each baby was introduced to 2 adults, to the first as a boy and to the second as a girl. The adults were asked to play with the baby for a short period of time. the babies were dressed so that it was impossible to tell whether they were a boy or a girl. The study showed that the adults played with the baby differently, depending on what they thought its sex was. If they thought the baby was a girl, they talked to the baby more and encouraged it towards nurturance type of play, such as cuddling the doll, dressing it or feeding it. If they thought the baby was a boy, the adults tended to encourage the baby towards active types of play, such as with the ball, blocks or trucks, and towards male role toys, like the fireman's hat. To check that the adults weren't playing differently in response to different play in the children, the study compared the type of play of boys and girls and found that there were no sex differences. The study showed that adults shape the behavior of boys and girls from early on, usually unconsciously. The adults in Fisher's study generally strongly held the view that boys and girls should be treated equally. Parents are the first and most powerful influence on the shaping of sex roles in boys and girls. Parents influence children, first of all, by direct teaching. They tend to reward children with approval and other favourable consequences when they're acting the way they want them to. They also punish them with unfavourable consequences like disapproval or a smack when they act in ways that they don't like. Parents also influence children by serving as models for their behaviour. Children learn a lot just by looking at what people do and imitating their behaviour. Children are more likely to imitate the parent who is of the same sex as they are. Parents are the most powerful models during the early years, since children are exposed to them usually more than other people. Parents often unknowingly lead children to develop unnecessarily rigid sex roles.
Well, parents always have an idea in their minds of what girls and boys should do, and this is related to what they think their children should be doing when they're adults in their future life. We have to remember that the ideas that parents have in their minds are stereotyped ideas about what men and women should do in society, and these are often called sex stereotyped roles. We have fixed ideas about what girls should do and boys should do, and these don't really take any note of the fact that amongst boys you've got a wide variation of types and kinds, and amongst girls you've got exactly the same situation.
American psychologist Jerome Kagan accepts that biological influences on male and female anatomy and physiology can lead to differences in behaviours and organisation of beliefs. He says, however, that there is no good reason for arguing that these differences should place serious constraints on the jobs and social roles available in our society. To quote from his most recent book, "Even if we acknowledge that a small proportion of vocations, probably less than 1%, are biologically better suited to one sex, most jobs in Western society probably could be filled satisfactorily by adults of either sex." Parents even create a different physical environment for boys and girls. One study of 48 boys and girls' rooms by Reingold and Cook showed that the furnishing contents of boys' and girls' rooms was very different. Boys' rooms were less decorative and more functional than girls' rooms. They had more educational material, toys involving mechanical spatial ability, sports equipment. The masculine home environment encourages vigorous, problem-solving, competent and competitive activities. Girls' rooms had more flowers, frills and dolls. The boys' rooms in the study contained 375 vehicles and the girls' rooms 17, whereas 26 of the girls' rooms had baby dolls, but only 3 of the boys. Feminine home environment encourages passive, nurturant and expressive activities.
John Sterling is a farmer with 4 children. There are 3 girls and a boy in the family. The oldest girl, Karen, is 15, and the second child, a boy, Chris, is 14. The 2 younger girls are 8 and 4. John shares with many New Zealand fathers a concern that his children, especially the boy, develop the type of typical masculine and feminine behavior he feels comfortable with. He's less concerned about Karen being very feminine, but wants Chris to be typically masculine.
A girl to moving towards a more masculine role is probably a more simple thing for a man to accept than a boy moving towards a more feminine role. And I think that as Karen moved towards doing more tomboyish things and getting involved with the things that Chris was doing and I was doing, I was quite happy about that. And I think that I even compensated to a certain extent with Chris and made sure that he did even more masculine things, rather than go the other way and get him involved in what might be called feminine things.
John clearly does hold different expectations for the future of his oldest daughter and his son. When asked if he'd thought of his daughter becoming a farmer when she grew up, John replied that he'd never given it a thought. Karen's main current job interest is in becoming a hairdresser. The possibility of Chris becoming a farmer, on the other hand, is one amongst others that the family has considered. It's not that John does not want his son to be able to show emotions and be sensitive to other people. He sees that allowing boys to play in a way which teaches them to care for other people is fine, to some extent.
Well, I'd agree with it up to a point, and I would certainly say that I'd like my son to be those things you mentioned, loving and kind and nurturing, but if that meant that he was going to become effeminate in the process, then I think I'd prefer him to be the way he was, which at times is less than pleasant and less than kind and just about bloody awful.
Many New Zealand families like the Sterlings are bringing up boys and girls with different expectations for the future. James and Jane Ritchie of Waikato University found that parents, but especially fathers in New Zealand, are very often worried about their sons behaving like sissies. Unfortunately, parents often confuse the social, emotional and intellectual characteristics rather arbitrarily ascribed to each sex with sexuality. They fear that if they allow boys or girls to act like the opposite sex in everyday behavior, they won't be able to develop normal heterosexual behavior when they grow up. Stereotyped sex roles have the effect of preserving the existing social structure, where women have less opportunity than men, and do not necessarily promote heterosexuality.
Already, by the time children are old enough for preschool at around 3, the pressures of parental teaching and modelling have usually set the course of sex role development on different tracks. By 3 or 4, children have developed rather clear concepts of sex roles. They grasp, for example, that it is impossible to change a person's sex. The development of concepts about sex roles is rather clearly related to other types of cognitive development. Lawrence Kohlberg says that children learn to categorize themselves according to sex. They develop an "I am a girl" feeling or "I am a boy" feeling. Children then tend to organize their feelings and activities around their concepts of themselves as boys and girls. They have a positive feeling about activities or characteristics which they feel belong to their own sex. Claire Kay is concerned at the effects of over-rigid sex role concepts on children's development.
Yes, I think that sex stereotyping is well established when children come into preschool at 3, and unless we can liberate children a little bit from the very rigid lines they seem to be thinking along then, there isn't much hope for teachers later on in working with them. The sort of thing I mean is that I think a lot of little girls, by the time they're 3, already have a real pattern of standing back, watching, and are almost convinced that they can't do very much at all. And this seems to me to be it's very important to allow them to find out that they can in fact do all sorts of things.
To allow boys to develop a full range of emotions is as important as allowing girls to be active and independent.
I think we have a lot of boys in the centre who enjoy dressing up very much and who play with dolls, and they show all sorts of gentler emotions when they're in this sort of play that carry over to cooperative play with other children. And again, I think to allow boys to develop a full range of emotions and show these is very important.
Preschool children have been shown in many studies to have rather different patterns of play. For example, in 1975, Mari Bell organised an observational study of children in 42 preschools in Wellington and Auckland on 2 fine mornings. The sample, therefore, included well over 1,000 children. Boys were found to use the climbing equipment, sandpit, carpentry table, blocks and bikes and trolleys considerably more than girls. Girls predominated in the family corner, dough table, painting and music corner. Generally, boys have been found to be more involved in active physical or spatial activities, while girls prefer more passive play, including social, family and expressive activities. Girls also tend to have more verbal and physical contact with adults and to show more dependence upon adults. During the preschool years, children begin to show a preference for playing with peers of the same sex. Boys are more likely to be seen playing with boys and girls with girls. Peers can shape each other's behaviour by acting as models and by showing approval or disapproval for each other's behaviour. Several studies have shown that children tend to have more interactions, both of a positive and negative kind, with children of the same sex. One common problem in the preschool is that children exclude each other from an area thought to be the preserve of that sex. In an Auckland observation study in a preschool setting, Elizabeth Connolly observed many rejection incidents by boys of girls in both the sand pit and the block area. Christine Rietveld observed similar rejection of boys by girls in the family corner. Although the vast majority of preschool teachers or supervisors are quite unaware of sex role stereotyping in their centres, there is good evidence that it is very widespread.
I think they have, both schools and kindergartens have a very great effect on the way in which girls and boys feel about themselves. Now, if a school teacher or a kindergarten teacher is forever talking about the girls doing this and the boys doing that, or praising girls for doing certain things and boys for doing other things, then naturally the girls and boys are going to continue to learn stereotyped roles in life. Another influence is the modelling one, where girls and boys will have a look at the person who's teaching them. If there is a woman always teaching young children, then that's what young children will think the world is like. Women always deal with young children. When they get further up through the school, of course, they'll find out that the principal's a man. And again, this will be their view of the world and give them ideas about what they're going to do in their future life.
I think also that the behaviour teachers themselves show in front of children often helps to reinforce the stereotype of appropriate behaviour for women, especially for girls. For instance, if they see teachers who really don't like to get messy, who like to stay neat all the time, and who don't feel themselves competent to deal with quite simple things that go wrong, perhaps a tap that's dripping or a hinge that needs screwing up or something of that sort, and feel that they have automatically got to call a man in to do that. I think that sort of behaviour will reinforce stereotyping. Very often, the very places a teacher stands around the room help to model what she considers appropriate. There is a real dearth of preschool teachers who enjoy doing carpentry and promoting carpentry skills, and I think that's very significant. We do need more teachers of both sexes working in preschool.
Sex role behaviour can also be learned from symbolic models, such as books and television, as well as from real-life people.
Another thing about kindergartens and schools, of course, is that they're sources of books. And these books are, again, the sort of material that will indicate to young children what they're supposed to do in later life. Unfortunately, the books that have been given them to children in the past have shown girls and women in a very limited range of roles. Adult women, for example, are usually shown as housewives. Men are shown in all sorts of interesting occupations. Boys in stories often have terrific adventures. They go off alone, and they do interesting things, and they lead people, which is all very nice. Girls shown in the same books tend to follow the boys, be a bit feeble, don't show very much aggressiveness, and so on. Now, these are all learning experiences for young children.
In 1976, Maris O'Rourke from Auckland Teachers College asked a group of kindergarten teachers to bring their 3 favourite children's books to an in-service course. Here is the list of roles available for males and females in the books. Men were shown in 58 enormously varied roles, from astronomer to traffic controller, and women were in only 6 rather limited roles of a caring or service nature. This book about an airport illustrates the fact that there are more varied roles available to men than to women. Maris O'Rourke also analysed the emotions, activities and behaviour portrayed in boys and men compared to girls and women. Again, the females were shown in emotional, passive, often trivial behaviours or feelings, while the men were active, aggressive, outgoing, larger than life. The Council for Equal Pay and Opportunity in 1975 examined New Zealand infant readers published by the Education Department, Price Milburn and Reeds. Males comprised 44% of all characters and females only 23%. To say that the books merely represent society is therefore clearly untrue. There was considerable evidence that the roles portrayed were stereotyped. Adult women were mainly seen as wives and mothers, doing domestic and caring work, girls as passive background figures. Men were again found in many roles. Little boys have an exciting time, are naughty and have a lot of fun. Do these books have an influence on children's attitudes or beliefs about what they can do? A study by Flirks, Fiddler and Rogers in 1976 convincingly demonstrates that exposure to stereotyped models in books can give children restricted concepts of what normal male and female behavior consists of, and that presenting males and females in non-traditional roles in books gives children a more flexible understanding of sex roles. The study has been replicated in a Dunedin kindergarten. The study involved randomly assigning preschool children to 2 story reading groups. Both groups were read stories for half an hour for 5 consecutive days in a week. One group of children were read egalitarian, non-stereotyped stories.
And kiss it goodnight and watch its eyes close. And then when you wanted to wake it up in the morning when the sun came in and start all over again, just as though he were its father.
The other group of children were read traditional stories, where males and females were shown in the usual stereotyped roles. The girls who heard the egalitarian stories showed a marked change of attitudes in the direction of believing a much greater array of behaviors to be appropriate for both sexes. Boys did not show a change in attitude. The study showed that the change in attitude was not a lasting one and began to fade after another week. The effect, however, was quite remarkable, considering the relatively brief exposure to a balanced representation of sex roles and the enormous amount of exposure to traditional roles in other books.
Although women are shown in a narrow range of occupations in books for school children, in real life they fill a larger variety of roles, and you can check this from looking at the census material. In 1975, women asked that the books that are produced by the Education Department should take notice of this and show women in a wider range of roles. Now, This, in fact, has been done, and it's one of the most encouraging things that I've seen. Girls are now shown as heroines, as the central characters in stories more often than they were in the past. Girls are shown in more daring situations, they are shown as being more adventurous, and women are shown in a wider range of occupations, and all of these things are quite true and quite accurate to life. So I really don't accept the argument that you're going outside what already exists.
There is evidence, then, that girls can be influenced towards developing self-reliance and confidence, learning to accept responsibility and being independent by reading books which portray women like this. Books can also help boys to overcome the barriers against developing feelings and caring for other people. Fortunately, there is gradually coming about an improvement in the treatment of sex roles in books. Publishers, such as Price Milburn, have made a real effort to avoid over-rigid stereotyping. Despite the availability of these books, there still exists the problem that sexist readers are still present in the schools. It is important to actually remove the worst ones. At the preschool level also, teachers need to look critically at the books present.
The first 5 to 7 years of life, the years of early childhood, provide some of the most powerful influences in shaping our future lives. Parents are usually the most powerful teachers and models. What can parents do to enhance healthy sex role development?
First thing that they can do is share roles themselves within the home, and then they act as models for their children. If they have a clear idea in their mind that both girls and boys should have a free choice of occupations and roles in the future, then I think that they can present this point of view. They can make sure that they choose reading matter that doesn't depict stereotyped roles for the two sexes. They can make sure that within the home that the boys take some part in the household tasks and caring for babies, and they can approve of things that girls want to do that are traditionally in the male domain. And it's important for them to be able to see that their mother does work. Now, whether this is paid or not is a matter that may not be very important, but the fact that an adult woman can work certainly is an important issue.
An increasing willingness to change the habitual pattern of family responsibilities is coming about in New Zealand. Phil Waite and Colin Pearcehouse are an example of a family who have not stayed with traditional roles.
I'm a senior lecturer here in the physiology department of the university, so that the job involves quite a bit of teaching. I teach medical and dental and science students, and the other main part of it is to do some research. I have a number of research projects going. When we thought that we'd like to have a family, we tried to think how we were going to organize it. We felt that it wouldn't be possible for us both to stay in professions that were really quite demanding in terms of hours, and so that we felt one person would have to leave. And the situation at the time was that I was in physiology and thoroughly enjoying it, and my husband was in computing and was rather disillusioned and dissatisfied with it. And so we thought about whether we couldn't make it work the other way around, and I think that it was the right decision, and it's worked really very well.
We live on a small farm in rather an old house, and most of my day goes in either doing house renovations or doing farm work. When Richard comes home from school, and I go to meet him most days, and he comes and works with me up until the time Phil and the other child arrive home. Robert, the younger son, he's been looked after by someone in town. He's in full-time childcare, so that gives me from, say, 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon to get on with renovating the house. But if the children are sick or there's school holidays, then yes, it's my job to look after the kids. I'm responsible for getting the the evening meal, the day-to-day running of the house, the shopping, washing the baby's clothes, these sort of things. When Phil comes home in the evening, she does the ironing and mending and things like that. I think the biggest regret, of course, is that there's now only one salary coming in, and we've had to adjust to that. I think I also regret from time to time not having many people around. I often miss the opportunity of talking to other people and exchanging ideas and thoughts, this sort of thing.
Colin and Phil do get some help with childcare for Robert from a Dunedin family daycare scheme, so the role reversal is not complete. Overall, Colin and Phil are very happy with their decision.
I don't think there are any problems in lifestyle. I think there's still one or two people who consider what I'm doing is a bit out of the ordinary. They tend to be older people, so hopefully that it will all change. As far as other advantages, Richard's 5 and Robert's nearly 2, and at this stage there's a lot of development going on. Richard's learning to read, and Robert's learning to talk, and I'm able to see more of that than Phil. I think we'd both like to, but I'm sort of privileged in that I'm there around them for more time than she is.
The other really powerful influence on young children is the preschool and school environment, and especially the teachers. Probably the first important prerequisite for change is that teachers understand what is going on by being aware of their interactions with children and of the children's behaviour.
First thing they've got to do is to realise that the sex roles are stereotyped. A lot of people, I think, would probably deny that children are taught stereotyped roles in schools, and yet there's plenty of evidence that boys are treated differently from girls.
Well, I think the biggest single change you could make would be to pay decent salaries so that we could employ people on the basis of whether they were good at helping children grow rather than prepared to accept what's offering in the way of pay. I think to encourage children to join in a full range of activities and to actually step in when children exclude each other on the basis of sex from activities are both terribly important. It's not enough merely to provide carpentry and wait and see whether the girls will take it up as much as the boys. You have to offer active encouragement and help children learn skills at all these things.
When children exclude the opposite sex from an activity, Claire Kay believes that firm action must be taken by a teacher.
It was usually boys on big climbing equipment, junk equipment, who said, "This is for boys, girls can't play here." And I really think you have to step in when that happens. I don't think you can let that by. I would try to suggest a role for the other child who wanted to get in, and that was usually quite effective. And I think to actually confront the issue and say that all the equipment is for all the children is also very important.
Children can also be tempted into activities that they don't normally do.
Well, again, I think finding a role is important, and I think it's interesting sometimes and sometimes possible to suggest a role reversal. And I think it's crucial for boys to learn to express emotions, tenderer emotions as well as aggressive ones. That's the only thing that really will lead to us having a civilized adult population.
The problem that most of the adult models are females is one that needs attention. Salary and working conditions are important, but so are public attitudes.
I think it's a disadvantage in one way to have women so heavily represented. I think there should be a place for men as models in preschools and in junior schools. It's not a very good idea, so far as I can see, to have in your primary schools the women all in the junior classes and the senior positions, the headmaster, the principal's position, and often the deputy principal, filled by a male. This does more than give children a model of what they should do as persons. This gives them a model of society.
But can we really change the division of labour between the sexes in our society simply through socialising children differently? Geraldine McDonald certainly does not believe that this is the complete answer.
There are two things that we have to think about when we're talking about socializing children into sex roles. Now, we can treat children in a way that is not stereotyped, so that we can broaden the range of ways in which little girls can act and broaden the range of ways in which boys can act. Then, as adults, we can assume that they would have a wider range of choices in jobs, things they do in the home, who cares for children, a whole range of things. But that is not going to make a great deal of difference unless society also makes a range of changes so that men and women can take up the options. I'm thinking here, for example, say, for example, that you had brought up a little boy so that he didn't think that it was sissy to care for young children. When he's an adult, he thinks, well, it would be rather nice if he took some time off work and looked after his own child. He can only do that if working conditions allow him to do it. If we have such things as glide time, which is already accepted, of course, but you also need to have leave, parental leave. People need to be able to go back into their jobs and not be disadvantaged because they've taken time off to care for children and so on. So it's two things. We have to prepare people for a wide range of options, and we have to prepare society so that those options can be taken up.